celebrity, and my first question is like, you've gotten famous recently. Yeah. So, how Yapi? That was good. That was gonna get real juicy there. Anyway, how Yapi? We're here at Racing Magpie. My name is Arlo Ironcloud, and today we are doing our winter camp series. And we are about 4 interviews in, and today we have a very special guest. She comes from Oglala Lakota Mokoche. She's also Turtle Mountain Anishinaabe. And you have like two certificates, right, from Dartmouth?
I have a
You have a double major, right?
Yeah, I have a double major. Yeah.
Somebody told me that. I thought that was
Yeah.
cool. So she has double major, she has certificates from Harvard, right? And I was, like I said, when I look at people, I don't want to like learn everything about them right away. So I learned a little bit of stuff, but I'm very pleased to introduce Autumn White Eyes.
Yeah.
Lakota. So Autumn, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I feel really honored and grateful to be here today.
Good. I don't know what, I'm still learning a lot. I'm not the best person. I'm very outspoken sometimes, and I don't know what is a spoken word artist? And what is femme? What does that mean in front of it? I'm really curious.
Oh, wow, those are really good questions. Those are really good questions. So I would say spoken word artist is somebody who performs their poetry and their who performs poetry and I want to say like oratory or oral art, performatory art for like the masses or for community, for other people, that like the way I see it is that when you that you're sharing your spoken word, you're sharing your word, your art with other people. So that's the way I interpret spoken word to be, is that it's art that's meant to be shared with other people. Kind of in the same way that oral tradition or the passing down of stories is in our own tradition of Lakota people. That's the way I view spoken word. That words are meant to be spoken and shared or passed down, shared among people. That's such an interesting question. Femme has a lot of wow. Okay, I was not prepared to talk about what femme.
You have to give us the whole gender and sexuality.
I know it's like a gender and sexuality class now. Femme. Okay, so there's a lot there. And I think I need to gather my thoughts a little bit.
Okay. Why is this? I mean, is it like describing Oglala sort of, or is it like there must be a lot into it
Of femme?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot in it in terms of like what is expected on to feminine people, I guess. But not just like feminine people, feminine presenting people. Femme is this identity that any person regardless of what their gender is, what sex they're assigned to at birth, can express.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because now I kind of got an idea where we're at now, because it's just kind of like It's a thought.
Yeah, it's kind of like an expression, a femme as in, it's interesting because I actually have a poem about this, but I don't think I have the notebook with me. Unless I write a lot in my phone. I might have it actually with me. But I do have a poem that it describes like what is femme, like femme as in this, femme as in that, femme as in this is what I mean when I'm talking about femme. And like a lot of the time, I think people think like when I'm talking about femme, I'm just talking about being a woman, which is not necessarily what I'm talking about. Like, yes, I'm assigned female at birth, but I'm also like reclaiming this part of femme, this strength that comes with being a feminine person, this matriarchy, the strength that comes within my grandmothers. I think about my Ojibwe grandmothers. I think about my Ojibwe grandmother, my grandma Jenny. Like she's so strong. She's so jovial. She's like the life of the party, right? Like there's this strength within her that that was just there. And she was taken when she was a little girl, to the boarding schools. And her culture was taken away from her, but like still she like maintained who she was as she was, and she reclaimed who she was as she was, and she didn't care what anybody thought about her, and that was femme to me.
That is dope.
Yeah.
That is cool as shit, because to me, when I was just talking to Minnie earlier, we were talking about like there's like lost things that our people knew about. And holy fuck, what if it was like that? What if it was that the female power? That's what I think it is when you say femme, the female power. What if there's this world that we just don't know about because we've just been living in this masculine society for so long?
Yeah.
What if there's this powerful world that we just don't understand anymore, and it's all in that?
Yeah. That femme power, and where does that power come from, and where does that energy come from? Because right, I think not just people who are assigned female at birth can feel that, but people who are assigned male at birth feel that. We see that in our weekday culture too. We see that among queer folks, feel that energy come from both places. And we could tap into that masculinity, we could tap into that femininity. And I feel that I feel I am a two-spirit person, so I can feel those energies in both places. So a lot of the time I feel that femme energy, but I feel that masculine energy too. And so how can I tap into both of those places?
That's cool.
In my writing and as a person, as I seek comfort. And where do I seek comfort? Because I have comfort in my grandmothers. I have comfort in my grandfathers too. I have comfort in the men in my life. I have so many strong men in my life. And I feel like the men in our they don't get as much like praise, or like the strong Lakota men in our communities. They don't get as much praise, but they're there. And like I know I have strong Lakota men in my family who do beautiful things for their family, and that there's strong, healthy masculinity in our families, in our communities
Oh
too.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. I recognize that whenever I'm like butchering a buffalo, for example. And when I get these young men in there, there's just like there's this want to pound our chests, like, yeah, we did it, and whatever that is right there, that lights those boys up.
Yeah.
And I don't see anything negative about, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or in a mannerism that would be like, negative for anybody in the community,
Yeah.
right? It's just like, man, do you feel that? Do you feel that? Do you feel it? And, you know, we just get
Yeah.
excited about something, and it's just like, and in my head though, it's just like we've developed this competence. And that little bit of competence feels so good, and it's
Yeah.
and because it relates to who we are as a people,
Yeah.
as the Lakota people. And so, oh man, that's cool. So like you're just kind of like trying to figure out where that power is, and you're trying
Yeah.
to identify it. How did you find yourself in there?
Geez, I don't even know, honestly.
Was there a moment where like you stood up and spoke and your voice trembled and you were like trying to get out whatever you're trying to say?
I don't know if there was a specific moment, but I do feel that power. Like when um, I think I talk about it a lot with my students and with my fellow educators who work with young people, and um, that transformative moment where whenever you first speak out as a young person and you share that poetry with an audience, there's that transformative moment, that words have that power, and that transformation happens within yourself too. It's kind of like the difference between just saying, like, you know, telling your teacher I need to go to the bathroom, and telling a group of people like I'm gay. Like there's there's a transformative thing that happens within yourself, but like the words you have power,
Hmm.
right? Like there's a difference between a judge saying you're being sentenced to death, you know.
Mhm.
Words have this power, and when those words take that breath, something transforms.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to share with you real quick. Um, when I used to work at Keely Radio and I would do the morning shows,
mhm,
I used to pray, I would smudge, and I would do all this stuff before I start. And I used to pretend that somebody was saying something to me that was living in Oglala somewhere. And they were talking to the radio. And then I don't know how that word got into the radio, and it goes all the way back through its FM signal. It hits the tower, it comes down, and it comes through the tower, goes through all that stuff inside, and then it comes to me.
mhm,
And I used to pretend that
mhm,
there was a grandma or a Munchi talking to the radio. And I would imagine what they would want to hear. And sometimes I feel like I just became this vessel that just channeled some things for me.
mhm,
And I mean, it was just my way of coping with having to talk,
mhm,
you know, because it was very challenging to speak out. And man, I remember whenever I first learned to speak on the radio, it was traumatizing, scary. But ever since then, though, like I have gotten a stepping stool on just being able to talk. And that ability to pronounce whatever I want at any given moment has been like the greatest gift for me, is just this ability to communicate my thoughts
mhm.
effortlessly almost too, because it's almost as if though that like there really is something channeling through you. So when you talk like that, that made me think of that moment,
Yeah.
because it was like it's really interesting, our words, because my ate, my dad used to always say that. He used to say your words are powerful.
Mhm.
And whenever we say I hate you when we were little
Yeah.
kids, he stopped us and he would say your words are powerful.
Yeah.
And for me, that stuck with me, because man, I was I was like so many thoughts on this too, but like because the way you're talking about like releasing how you're trying to figure things out, man, that must have been challenging. Just I mean, you're probably still in the mix of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think, well, that kind of reminded me too of I'm kind of in process of learning Lakota language. And learning Lakota it's like learning another mindset or another way of viewing the world. Or seeing the world through the Lakota way of life, right? And as you learn Lakota, you're learning the language in a way where you're learning the language in a way where you're learning to speak it, but you're also learning to think it in the way that our ancestors would sort of think it, and that means like the opposite to the way an English mindset would be. And so there are a lot of things in Lakota that are opposite to English, like you don't think about gender in the same way either, which is something I really love about Lakota. Like you're not always thinking about somebody's gender, for example, like there aren't pronouns like she is doing that, or he, like there's a she, he, it, like there's a woman's way of speaking or a masculine way of speaking and a feminine way of speaking, but you get to choose, like I'm gonna say yeah or yellow, or I'm gonna say he or ho, those words, but you don't say she is riding the bike or whatever, she's walking, Mani, it's, you're not always thinking about somebody's gender, like she's walking. There's not a, you don't say that in Lakota. So that's one of the things that I really loved when I first was learning Lakota, was that like I didn't have to think about, gender in that way. And so I love that about learning Lakota. And then there are other things like just the way the words and the sentences are structured, right? The sentence structure. I get to be a really nerd about sentence structure, grammar, and Lakota. I get really in the weeds about that, but just like the way action is like centered, or like how it's such an action oriented language, and to be really focused in on that is really beautiful. And then I'm starting to put that into my poetry too.
Really?
Putting a lot of Lakota into my poetry and trying to center that into my work, because I've always been kind of not against it, but just it's been hard for me to sort of break into this the poetry world in the mainstream sense, like to publish mainstream. I've self-published my work mostly, and it's hard for me to want to publish like through journals or things like that, because I think a lot of my audience is Lakota people and wanting to share my work to Lakota people, and because a lot of my work is focused on what I experience as a Lakota person, but what is our history, there's so much richness to where we're at. There's so much history, and later on I'll do a workshop here at Racing Magpie, and I'm going to talk about the richness of our place and the soil, our environment. There's so much to write about here that sometimes I feel like my audience is here, that I don't feel like not that I don't feel like there's a need for there to be audience outside of this place, but it's harder for me to branch out a lot of the time. And so I tend to, now I'm like starting to write Lakota poetry and poetry in Lakota, I should say. Then it's harder for me to publish in mainstream places.
Was that difficult to do? It sounds like something that you've always, to me, just from hearing you, it sounds like something you've always had a challenge with, is expressing yourself in like spaces that you were just not familiar with, like,
I think so, like, I mean.
like what like you just said that like you have a yeah, such a it sounds like you have this big ball of thought, and it's like you want the world to have it, or you know what I mean? Like, where do you want this to go?
I
And then,
know, yeah.
and you're like, what should I do with this? And you're like, but I don't want them to have it. You know?
It's hard because I feel like it's so sacred.
Yeah,
too.
that's yeah, right.
Yeah.
That sounds. I mean,
It's really sacred. And maybe part of that is, you know, what I've learned too about our culture is that it is so sacred and we want to keep it close to home. So I think yes, and it's so sacred. I want to keep it close to home. And I've had a lot of supporters in my life that have helped me along the way to, you know, encourage me to share my art, you know, who have encouraged me to feel confident in my writing and myself, and who have told me, you know, your words are powerful. You need to share them. You need to share them with the world. I've had people along the way who've encouraged me at places like Dartmouth and Harvard, and mentors like Lori Puyer and Mary Bordeaux, and you know, who have encouraged me along the way.
nice.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, I can't imagine having something like that. And then there's that concept. It's like because it's Lakota, anybody should have it, right?
Yeah, just being
It's kind of one of those
generous.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really challenging in this day and age to like revive something and then come to find out it's sacred. And then come to find out also that it's something that should be, you know, handled very carefully. So I can't imagine your spot because it's different for you because it sounds like you're navigating something. You're literally forging a path in your own little space. Do you often get many young people coming to you and asking your process or how you got there?
Not so much asking about my process or how I got there. I get a lot of young people asking me for support on their own work. Can you support me in getting me along the way? Like, can you support me by looking over my poetry, giving me advice? Can you look over my applications, my writing, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Mentor them in their work, which I love to do. I really do. I love looking over other young people's writing and supporting them.
Is poetry a natural thing for people, would you say?
I think it's so interesting. I think for Lakota people,
Thank you.
I think for Lakota people, I think it comes really naturally to them.
Because I've heard your dad talk a couple times. Because it comes off very spoken wordish.
Yeah. It's funny, he does like to freestyle sometimes.
Oh, it's dope. I mean,
But I don't know if he's just joking around or
oh, I know,
he
right?
loves to joke.
That's that's the Lakota dad and all of us, man. We want to like just make it fun.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to listen to people talk, especially on a platform like on like I remember being I remember being up at the steps of the government the government steps over here in Rapid, and Russell Means got up there, and this guy was going off. There's not Russell Means, but there's this young man there, and he was going off, and he was just like saying the weirdest stuff, and it had no relation to, you know, whatever it was. But here he comes in and he goes, "Hey, young man, calm down. They're looking at you." Like he was talking loud, like he made the presentation. He goes, "They're looking at you," you know, and just pointed, and he goes, "If you don't look like if you don't," something, the way he said it though, but it almost looked like it was spoken word because it was just like it captured everybody. And the way he delivered it to that young man, it was just about like, hey man, calm down. I know you're angry, but we have to organize, kind of like talk, is the way he said it. But when I see people like your Ade in front of the classroom delivering, it seems like spoken word. And I mean, that stuff is cool. I mean, to imagine being able to be on a podium and say everything you wanted to say correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, that would like, I mean, having that power
Yeah.
is something I think all of us kind of strive for a little bit because we want to be able to deliver what we say. I mean, oh, okay. I had a question for you. I had a good question for you, but I spaced it out because we went down a different road. But I like what we're talking about here because oftentimes I get from young people they have a problem trying to speak. Why is that such a problem on, it seems very predominant on reservations. Why is that such a problem for young people to talk? What do you think?
You know, I've noticed that a lot too myself. There's a lot of I think young people are really reserved, um, especially when it comes to, you know, being in the classroom. When they're with their friends, I'm sure you know, they're not, it's not like they're, you know, have their hoods on and they have their hands in the shy girl look, you know. The native shy girl look.
Native Shaggy.
We know that young people, when they're with their friends, they're having fun, they're talking, they're happy. But when they're in the classroom, they're in a space of being reserved. And I think a lot of it comes down to comfort and safety. And, you know, are they in a space of safety where they feel safe to be themselves? And are they feeling safe to be comfortable, to share who they are and to share their art? You know, I've been in the classroom space of art and poetry with young people where, you know, they have opened up. I've been in a classroom space where they've gotten to make beats with an artist, Terrence Jade, for example. He brought out I don't know what it's called, like a sound machine. And they're, you know, before he came in, they had their hoods on, their heads on the desk. They're really like, I don't want to be here, kind of, I'm tired, I'm sleepy. He brings out the music machine. They're all in a huddle around him and they're making beats. They're happy. They have their smiles on. They're all trying out different things. They're up against the whiteboard and they're making lyrics with him.
Oh, wow.
And they're talking, you know, they're creating relationships with each other. And then these are all kids who didn't even know each other before he came into the classroom. So I think it's a number of things. It's who's the instructor in the classroom. Do they know these kids? Are they making them feel comfortable when they come into the classroom? Is the subject interesting to them? Is it hands-on? Is it an interesting topic? You know, there's a lot of different things that come into play, I think, that help young people feel interested in the topic. And it's tough too. I've also been in poetry workshops where it's hard to get that art out of them too.
Yeah. You know, whenever I think about people, whenever they write and they create things, I always think, how long did it take you to do that? You know, like, do you have pieces where you write and you just keep changing it and like trying to mold it to something that's like, this isn't it yet?
Yeah,
What do you do with, like, how do you get away from that? How do you get away from constantly, you know, fixing something?
Oh, that's hard.
Do Do you do that or do you just?
Yes, sometimes I just post it. And I have a couple of audience members in here who probably seen me do this. Sometimes I just post it on my social media and I say, can anybody give me feedback on this? I ask my friends and peers for feedback. That's usually what helps me. If I'm ever stuck on something where I'm like, I need another set of eyes to look at this for me. They give me some kind of feedback to kind of help me ground me in this piece that I'm writing, give me some kind of affirmation. Sometimes helps to help me, know like I'm on the right path or I need to stop or I'm like, or I need to, edit this down. Sometimes I once had a poem that was like 3 sections long and I just decided to take 2 sections out of it and then I published just 1 section
Really?
of it.
You
Yeah.
ever wonder what would have happened if it had the rest of it?
I do think about it a lot. I do, because, I think about how personal that poem was
Yeah.
and what it's about and, what it would mean to publish the other 2 sections, but, I think it stands alone too, as it is.
When I was in 8th grade at Our Lady of Lourdes, do you remember the Bigfoot conference stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Bigfoot conference, they used to have a writing poetry thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if they still do or not.
No,
In 8th grade, this kid, his name is Collins, like bet me I couldn't write a poem.
Mhm.
And I went
That's cute.
I went home and I was like, I could write a poem and I didn't know how to do it. And I remember like at the time I really liked wolves. So I knew a lot of information about wolves. I wrote this big ass letter about wolves.
Mhm.
And then I took that letter and I broke it into smaller versions. And then I had a small poem. It was like 4 paragraphs, but it was like, and it rhymed. It had to rhyme. I don't know why, but it needed to rhyme. So all of it rhymed. And I remember I submitted it. And then the principal comes at me next week and she goes, Arlo, your poem won. And I was like, oh, that's cool. What did it win? She goes, the whole thing. And I was like,
So
what do you
cute.
mean the whole thing? And I guess whatever it was, there's like so many variations of the writing. I didn't know that. But I wrote this poem and I remember I would go back and at the time there's no internet, right? So like I would go into the back room, freaking like write. And then I'd come back out and I'd be like, Mom, what rhymes with gray wolf? It's like, or just what rhymes with wolf, or what rhymes with canis lupus, what rhymes with all these things. And I came up with this beautiful poem. I don't know what happened to it, but like whatever that is, I worked on it for like a week. Like I could not put it down. I could not that's why when I asked you, how do you pull away from something like that? Because
Yeah.
I know I do that in life too, because we're like, I'll work on something, and I'm like, damn it, that's not it, and you just get so raveled up in it.
Yeah.
And you cannot put it on paper.
Yeah.
But sometimes you do and gets you first place at
Yeah.
Bigfoot conferences, but it's just weird like that, right?
Yeah.
What do you do whenever you like can't get it out or whatever you're stuck on something? What are your thoughts on those? What do you do?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like it's hard to pull away from it. Well, for me, I think like you have to have a practice when it comes to art. I think any art, like you have to have a practice and a discipline. And it's tough because we live under capitalism
Yeah.
and we have to work and we have to pay our bills and I do all that too. I work full time. And so for me, whenever an idea pops into my head of like a poem that I want to write, I use my phone a lot of the time, which I don't love. Like I would prefer to like write with my hand. But I take my phone, I pull up my notes app and I start writing, like whatever the idea is. I'm like, I need to write down or I'm gonna forget it. And I just have to, no matter where I'm at, no matter what I'm doing, I have to do it because if I don't, I'm gonna lose it.
Mhm.
So I write it down as much as I can in that moment. And you're right, it's hard to pull away whatever I'm doing. I'm like, I need to do this now. Or I'm gonna forget. And I write as much as I can in that moment. And I save it. And then I use mostly nighttime for my practice of writing. So
What is nighttime? Oh, I mean, oh, I see what you're saying. I thought you were saying an app.
oh no, like I practice writing at night most of the time. So that's when I write the best is at night before I go to bed.
Mhm.
So before I go to bed, I'll try to write like return to poems, then edit poems at night. I'll go back to those poems that I wrote. Like if I wrote something during the day, I'll edit poems before I go to bed at night. Try to spend like an hour before bed doing that. And so that's what my practice will be, is like an hour before bed.
Tell me, what is a poem to you? Because that was one of the things that hit me whenever I was writing
Mhm.
those. What is poetry? I remember asking Mark Tilson Jr. about
Mhm.
that.
I'm curious what was his answer.
Yeah,
I don't know what his answer was first.
No.
I have an answer, but I'm curious what his answer
he
was.
said a poem is an artistic way of getting a thought across.
An artistic way of getting a thought across.
I feel like he's looking at the screen now and cussing me out for not saying it right. I don't, but it was more like getting your point across creatively. Creatively, I mean creativity. Anyway, what is a poem, Autumn?
For me, a poem is it's a short story. It's a short story.
Doesn't need the rhyme.
Doesn't need to rhyme. It's just a short story. It could be as short as, about a wagon outside. That's a poem. It could be about
A thought.
a thought.
The other night, or not the other night, it was a few months ago, me and my wife got into an argument.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know what it's like to have like arguments with a spouse
Mhm.
that you've been with for a long time.
Mhm.
Sometimes they get a little heated.
Mhm.
Well, anyway, I went outside, I went to smoke a cigarette, and I was standing outside, and I just remember thinking, ah, like I gotta go back in there and talk to her. And there was something that hit me though at that moment where it was like, I'm so happy to have this right now, though. As bad as I felt and angry as I felt,
Mhm.
and all of that, I was so happy to have that.
Mhm.
Because whatever that was, it just kind of hit me where it was like, this is a man thought.
Mhm.
And I don't know what that man thought is that whatever that moment was, it was very powerful enough to hit me. And it was just like strike me almost and tell me that you're not in a bad spot.
Mhm.
Remember that. But that's what hit me. It was just like, I was like, oh, and like, just like angry. And all of a sudden it was like, it's just that moment though.
Yeah.
That thought, I felt like I could write about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That sounds like it would be a really good poem. Honestly, like
Yeah.
I could imagine that.
Well, that's what I mean is like,
Yeah.
there's you get into spaces like when you're
Yeah.
talking about, you get into these thought spaces where like, if you don't have anybody to relate to,
Yeah.
you're it's all
Yeah.
bundling up inside you.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like for me, poetry really becomes an outlet for those spaces, for that emotion. Definitely for me. I mean, I really feel like I'm at a point now where so this is my first book of poetry. And we talked a little bit earlier about so this is my first book of poetry instructed by Hani. So we talked a little bit earlier about them and about femininity and masculinity. But in the book, I talk a lot. I mean, I explore, I think femininity as it's brought through the energies of the moon, Hami, the moon. But I think masculinity is through, for me at least, I think brought through the energies of we, the sun. And right now I feel like I'm at a point where I've really outgrown this collection of poetry. I feel like it still stands alone as like a really beautiful collection of poetry, and I still really love it. And I still want to do something where I update it and have a second edition come out where I update some of the poems and fix some typos. But I still love this collection, but I feel like I've really outgrown it. And now I'm kind of writing more about, I'm at this point of my life where I'm really thinking, or I'm really, at kind of what you were talking about, like that, those emotions that need to be released, right? And not only those kind of emotions, but also at this point of society where we deal with so many different things, I think through, society, the administration, what we deal with as Lakota people, but also this sense of solidarity, I feel, as a Lakota person with migrant workers, with Black folks, living in the city for so long. I lived on the East Coast for about 10 years before I moved back home. So I have a lot of these poems as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in my writing too.
I like the title in the book,
Mhm.
Instructed by Howie.
Mhm.
How did you come up with that name?
So I was looking up, I did a lot of research on different Two-Spirit societies throughout the US and the US, North American, Native American context. And a lot of the words for their kind of like weekday, their I want to say their Two-Spirit society, their Two-Spirit society, their words for that. The English translation was instructed by the moon. That was their word. Their word was instructed by the moon.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Dang, isn't that neat how these little bitty simple things
Mhm.
can bring such an enlightenment to a people
Mhm.
whenever it's something like that.
Yeah.
I always have this thing about like Two-Spirit
Mhm.
where it's like from a man's perspective.
Mhm.
I'm the minute I see like the little bit of disrespect or injustice or whatever, like I get on it right away
Mhm.
because I think about that moment, like whenever there's these kids. I remember growing up and being told, don't act like a girl, don't,
Mhm.
all these horrible words. I'm like,
Mhm.
don't be a girl, don't be feminine and all this stuff.
Mhm.
But there's so much inlie for femininity.
Mhm.
That sounds, I don't know if that's a word, but like
Mhm.
there's such an inlie for men to go into that space,
Mhm.
but we are starting to push that away, and it's kind of scary. But like to find femininity, I don't know if that's a word. Sorry if I offend anybody, but like find it in the moon.
It's a
Yeah.
word, yeah.
To find it in the moon
Yeah.
and identify yourself through it.
Yeah.
Man, that's the stuff Lakota people are made of, man.
Yeah. And then I was thinking a lot about the oral tradition, right? Of Maui and we and Ite, right? And that Ihani, right? That old story about them being together at that dinner, right? And Iktomi tricks them. And he sits Ite next to we, and Hawi gets jealous, right? and they separate them, and there's that betrayal. And then they're separated forever, and that's why we have night, and that's why we have day. And so that instruction of why men and women, right? And then they say women are instructed by the moon, and men are instructed by we, right? And so I was thinking about that a lot too as I was writing this book. And I was thinking about, okay, so how we, and then there are these special moments where they come together,
Yeah.
right? But what is Holly really thinking? And, are there parts of this story that can be interpreted that we aren't getting?
Wow.
Right? There's polygamy in Lakota culture. How does that play a part?
Yeah, right.
Or is there polyamory?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows?
There's
Yeah.
queerness in our culture.
Right.
There's weekdays, right? How much is lesbianism happening in our culture? I don't know.
Right. It's really interesting to learn about ourselves intimately and then discover ourselves through these things like the moon and the sun, how me and we. It's really interesting to learn about our culture and these spaces where people just take it for granted. Oh, it's the moon, it comes up every night. Yeah, well, there's a few nights that don't. What happens then?
Yeah.
And then what you just said there, what does how we think?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's really a special space to think about because there are things there that like, I mean, today's relationships, I mean, if you go anywhere, fuck, you're gonna run into somebody, what's your relationship like? And they're just gonna go, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like that, I just think that our understanding of our intimate relationships as Indigenous people are far different from this culture we've been raised up in. And when you say like polygamy, me and my wife have been talking about that. It's just this space where it's like, you don't own me. I don't belong to you.
Yeah.
It's just this space that it deserves to be looked at because the way we're raising ourselves in our communities. Yeah. So there's your direct relation of like what your work does. I mean, it just kind of creates people's thoughts to think. And that's also a space where like whenever I talk on the radio, when I used to talk on the radio, I used to say stuff and then not even think about the consequences of saying something. So where do you go whenever you say something and you're like, this is very touchy, or it's you're afraid to say it? What do you do? Do you just kind of hide out behind the covers, waiting for the first reply or the first nod of hide under the bed for your first response?
I don't know. I don't know what I do whenever, like when I share things. A lot of the time I was really scared because the first poem in this book is about Holly and we, and that's how I start this book, is talking about those questions. And I was scared as like, I hope an elder reads this and isn't just like blasphemy.
Isn't that the worst, right?
Yeah, and then there were some other poems in here, and I was like, oh, I hope my mom and dad read this. And they're just like, Autumn. But like I just have to stay true to like this is my truth.
Yeah.
And it's hard because I think in poetry, like when you read it in an academic place like Dartmouth, they say to read the poem like the poet is separate. The author or when you're reading a poem in an academic place, they separate the poet from the poem. if that makes sense. The speaker is separate from the poem.
Mhm.
And so, but it's interesting because I feel like so much of myself is poured into the poetry.
Is that why you have to have spoken word with your poetry? Because the delivery is in the
Is
poem too?
is inherently, I think, me. I feel like maybe I think it's part of my tradition as a Lakota person. I think I think it's important for me to distinguish that spoken word, or that it is an oral tradition to Lakota people. Like when I think about spoken word, like how you were saying earlier, when when you saw Russell Means, you felt like that was spoken word when he
Mhm.
was up there speaking about activism, or when he was speaking to the people, it felt like spoken word. When I was a little girl and I used to listen to my great grandmother, like I was lucky enough to know some of my great grandmothers when I was a little girl, and I'd sit and listen to them speak. My grandma Ida and my grandma Mary. It felt like spoken word when I was a little girl, and I listened to them, speak, sit on the ground and hear them tell stories. Like to me, that was like oral tradition, that was spoken word. And it was them telling their story. So for me, this is my truth, this is my story, and I can't separate myself from it. So I think that's why it's hard for me to separate myself from this work.
So do you have another book coming out?
I hope so someday soon.
Why do you think-
I'm working on a couple projects, I'd say. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Maybe not in a year, but maybe in a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're lining them up though.
Yeah.
What do you look for? Like in this, you had instruction by Homie, and I'm sure there's like lots of stories pertaining to the moon
Mhm.
and femininity. But
Mhm.
do you have an idea that you can share with us of what the next one is gonna look like?
Yes, I can share. I think at least one of my projects is going to be centered a lot around heartbreak and kind of coming out of that. So I was married and I got divorced, and so a lot of that is kind of biographical about coming out of that whole thing. So I have a lot of poems kind of lined up about that process. And then I have, like I said before, a lot of poems about kind of, I said a kind of out. So this poem or this book is, I'll take a second and I'll share a little bit more about that book. But I think another collection I want to write is kind of centered on some societal issues, and I haven't quite figured that one out, that collection yet, but yeah, some social justice issues.
Oh, that's cool. That's really interesting because, man, one of the things we don't talk about on people's relationships.
Mhm.
Oh, man, what if everybody shared their own breakup story?
Yeah.
We'd probably look at each other a little bit differently. We'd probably like, oh, damn, you were done wrong. That's why you behave like that. Anyway,
But this book this book is like it's a collection of poetry that I really wrote from the ages of 17 to 25. So like it's a lot of poetry I wrote when I was really young.
mhm.
It's broken into 3 sections: language, love, and land. So it kind of is centered around those 3 subjects.
Cool. Cool, right on. So today you're gonna do a class here at Magpie?
Yep.
What are you gonna do?
So we're gonna center on the workshop is gonna center around place. So I mentioned a little bit earlier that there's so much history and richness in our place. and in our environment. So the writing prompt is going to center around, you know, what we're going to write about is around our place and in our environment. So I'm gonna, do some work around that, share one of my own poems, and then to help inspire the conversation, and then provide a writing prompt on that.
Cool. Cool, that'll be today here following this conversation. One of the things I like to do in this winter series is I like to open it up to everybody into if there's anything they want to share into the crowd, and if anybody wants to add anything or ask a question to our presenter here, if you guys feel free, if you want to jump in.
I'm gonna ask a question. When you're self-publishing, so you're publishing your own book, where do you traditionally post most of your like poetry? Like, is it like Instagram? How are you communicating on like the regular, like artistically?
On the regular, I post on my personal Instagram, so at Autumn White Eyes, my Instagram. And then I sell my book on my Etsy, which is at Indigithem. So INDIGETHEM Indigithem is the Etsy.
And then I'll just ask, what are some other poets that you admire, or you like go to their work? If you just give us some.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yes, definitely. So, spoken word artist I really love is Maida Devaya. I love her work. I've been a huge fan of John Trudell like my entire life. Christos has been a big influencer of my life. I think she's Menominee from the 80s. I've read her work a lot. Christos, yeah. Up and coming is Kinsale Drake. I've been reading her new collection of work. Ariana Brown got a great collection, and Eve Tuck, I think is her last name. Yeah, they're all great.
Cool.
Yeah.
I know this is putting you on the spot. Would you mind reading one of your poems for us?
Sure, I'd love to.
And your choice.
Sure, yes, I'd love to read something from my collection. Choose a good one.
No pressure.
Oh geez, I don't know, what are you all feeling right now that might help me choose something?
Do one on love.
Yeah.
Do a
Let's do
love?
one on love.
A love poem.
Well, while she's looking for that, there's something that dawned on me whenever I was thinking, on my own personal life, like, okay, so the only woman I've ever asked out, I'm married to her right now. And I was going back and like in my list of like, what is a breakup? So I'm like going in my head, I'm like, nope, like, cause I barely remember my first kiss. And then my first high school girlfriend, it's like puppy love or whatever it was. I don't know if that's real. And then this is just like that though, but like I could count the amount of people I mean, I'm not trying to say anything against anybody, but like I can count the amount of partners on one hand for me. And when you said breakups, that made me panic a little bit because it was like, oh, I don't have a breakup story. And then I panicked a little bit. I was like, oh, what's gonna happen to me whenever Lisa's gone?
Oh, no.
Or if she leaves or something like that. And it was just this little panic in me because it was like, I don't think I've ever went through a breakup. And that panicked me a little bit.
No.
That freaked me out a little bit because it was like, wow, I might treat her a little bit better now. I'm just kidding.
Okay, I'll read. I should have named this section not love because it's all sad, but yeah, I'll read you this poem called Forgotten. I wish I could sing you my sorrows. I wish I could sing you my secrets. I wish I could sing you my innocence. Then maybe you would believe it's not just my teasing that keeps you from giving my body or ignoring your sullen black eyes. In one last conversation, I will give you my heart and sing to you a goodbye, sealing your lips with one last kiss and fall into snow, spreading my arms to create the angel, which so many have forgotten while passing underneath snowflakes.
Or-
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to add in here at the tail end of our conversation?
I don't think so. Just, I hope that you all can join us at our workshop at 2. Is it 2?
Well,
2:30?
after this.
After this,
There
yes.
is one question on Zoom.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Someone, Amy just asked, do you have a favorite way that you get inspired to begin writing and get in your flow? Like, do you listen to certain music or anything like that?
Yes, I do like to listen to music. Yeah, that actually does help me get into my flow. And I would say some of the music, I like to listen to rap music that'll help me get into my flow, or hip hop music. And some of my favorite artists that kind of help me are Atmosphere and Blue Scholars. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Autumn.
Yeah, thank
Thank you
you.
for
Thank
coming
you
here
for
today.
having me.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I really appreciate that. Everybody watching on, thank you guys for joining us. Doksha.
Yes, Doksha Ake, Wachiam Kikte.
Yay.
Thank you. I can't find that poem.